Okay, thank you everybody for coming tonight. So this is the third presentation in the ICEC 75th Anniversary Leadership Series. We usually have them on the 15th of the month, but the 15th is on Friday this month, so that's why we're having it on Thursday. And so every month we have different speakers relating to special education and leadership and just things that people in special education need in order to do their jobs well. So tonight we have Dr. Meg Carroll from St. Xavier University talking about accommodating, aiding, and affirming students with ADHD. So I'm gonna hand it over to you to introduce yourself and get started.
Welcome. I am a professor at St. Xavier University in Chicago. You'll see that here on the slide in a moment. And this is my 47th year as a teacher. So it's pretty exciting. And I fooled around a little bit with alliteration here, starting many of the words with A. And I'm hoping that we can really stick to this idea, not shaming, blaming, beating, or other things like that, that we can really stick with this accommodating, aiding, and affirming. So I'm going to show you some images of our little rascals. This will not surprise you at all. And even in silhouette, we can often find them. You will notice that many of these images look like boys. That is not just a accidental thing as well. And so let's take a look at this whole idea of what ADHD is. And I found this wonderful graphic that says what people think it is trouble focusing, poor parenting, immaturity, hyperactivity, and fidgeting. What ADHD really is poor working memory, easily distracted, impulsivity, executive dysfunction, poor sense of time, anxiety, and I want to emphasize that word is larger in this image on purpose, poor organization, and also absent-mindedness. And you might think, well, you look at the two lists and none of those terms are actually complementary. But I think in the second list, you get a better idea of how much less control an individual may have over themselves when they possess those traits. This is usually not willful disregard. It can look like it. It can look like belligerent. It can look like refuse. But often these kids are trying as hard as they can to hold on to their little shred of working memory and ability to pay attention. So what is ADHD? Well, it's a neurological inefficiency in the area of the brain which controls impulses, aids in screening sensory input that could otherwise be too bombarding, too distracting, and that allows us to focus attention. If that area of the brain, sometimes called the governor of the state, if you think about the body as a state, when the governor is not well and in bed and not working hard to organize the state is in trouble. And that's one way of thinking about this neurological inefficiency. If I can't control my impulses or screen sensory input or focus my attention, I'm going to have trouble, particularly in school. ADHD is a biological disorder. That means that it is not something the child chose. I doubt there's parents across America who have prayed to whoever they believe in, please God, let me have a child with a disability. And if at all possible, could you make it ADHD? I don't think so. This is a biological disorder. It's a chemical imbalance in the neurotransmitter levels. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that are released by the neurons themselves into the synaptic fluid or spinal fluid that bathes our central nervous system. Because it's biological, there is a hereditary disposition link that has been identified as well. So often when we have a child with ADHD, we can find at least one relative in the generation before who also has the characteristics. So who has it? Well, about 3 to 5% of children and teens. So in your classroom of 30, if you're a gen ed teacher, you are not allowed to say that 6 to 9 of your students have ADHD. I think you might have forgotten what the typical characteristics and energy level of kids at the ages you teach, if you think that many have it. Even those of us who teach special education cannot claim that every child in our room has this particular disorder. There are 3 to 4 times as many boys as girls that are diagnosed. And I'll call your attention to the phrase I use. We're not sure that it really is less common in girls, but girls may look more like a pleasant space cadet than a troublemaking, restless child. And we're often willing to tolerate pleasant space cadets. We just think, oh, she doesn't have much going on for her. She's not very bright. But imagine that some of those cases might in fact be ADHD without the hyperactivity. The characteristics that most of the individuals who have this condition may show us are poor attention. That is a criterion. If the child does not have difficulty paying attention, it may be another disorder. They're often distractible. And I know you're wondering, what the heck are they paying attention to instead of you? Because, you're fabulous. We will talk about that tonight. They may be impulsive. Lavoie calls this the leap before you look phenomenon, or the ready, aim, fire. Oh, no, I should have aimed before I fired. And then hyperactivity in some cases, up to half of boys, often closer to about a third, and a much smaller number of girls are likely to have that hyperactivity characteristic. Many kids with this condition are disorganized. And you might be saying, yeah, but all 6-year-olds are, or all 12-year-olds are. And thank you for noticing. When we look at our kids' characteristics, we're looking at just a little bit sharper, a little bit more frequent. These kids don't have characteristics that no other kid on the planet has. And many of these kids also experience emotional over-arousal. That just means that their emotions are very intense. So when they're laughing, they're like really silly, kind of out of control. And when they're mad, they might stand up and flip their desks over and then look surprised. They didn't plan to do that. It was just that impulsivity phenomenon. So what strengths do these rascals have? And you're thinking, oh no, that isn't how we look at disabilities. Well, we should. We should look at the assets kids may bring to us. And one of those assets for many kids with attention deficit disorder is intelligence. Many also have strong verbal skills. They could talk the hind leg off a mule. They're going to give you trouble as soon as you make them write it down or stay in their seat to do it. But many of them can talk it up and show you that they are learning by what they say. They may also have good imagination. They may be gifted in music or in athletics or in the arts. They may have lots of energy. And we often think of this not as an asset, but as a terrible characteristic that costs us energy. But honestly, having lots of energy is a good thing. We just have to kind of focus it or aim it a little better. Many of these kids have great senses of humor, although you might not like the brand they have. Many are capable of new insights. They may be very intuitive and they might be sensitive. And this one is weird because here they are, not paying attention to what other people need, saying any dang thing that comes out of their mouth, but then they are highly and easily offended because of their sensitivity characteristic. It's an interesting combo. The last asset these kids have is risk-taking. In childhood and in adolescence, we often think about this as a bad trait. Yeah, I can join that game. Yeah, I can walk on that roof. Yeah, I'll give that jumping off of the cliff a try. But risk-taking is often celebrated in adulthood. Think about entrepreneurs, think about explorers, think about inventors. So I have listed that here as a strength, and I hope that we can at least pay attention to where those strengths might be in each kid with ADHD that we serve. And then what other disorders might these kids have? Well, multiple disabilities a very small percent of kids with disabilities have this, usually have very acute symptoms, and they cut across wide areas of behavior. They're probably medical and cognitive and physical and social. But what we call it when kids have just a cluster, perhaps, or two of milder disorders is not multiple disabilities, but comorbidity. And here are the common disorders that some folks who have ADHD may also have. And one is learning disabilities. We know that this is the most common disability category diagnosed for our schools in these United States. And it is not uncommon for ADHD and learning disabilities to walk as a pair. I've seen some students benefit from medication for the ADHD, and while that is under control, they're better able to learn strategies for coping with the LD. And then once they have anchored those strategies in their repertories, they may not need the medication for ADHD after some period of time. Another category that might run in a partnership with ADHD is depression, including bipolar depression. Another one is oppositional defiant disorder. And you can imagine, if I have no breaks, if I do the first thing that occurs to me and I have ODD, no adult is probably going to like what I choose to do. Many, in fact, have anxiety disorder. And then I pointed that out to you in our second slide. When we see these kids being belligerent, seeming like they just won't do what we've asked them to do, I want you to at least consider, could this be anxiety? And think how we cope with anxiety. We can strike out, we can look like we're in a rage, and that might be what we're actually seeing. Tourette syndrome could also run in a partnership with ADHD, and conduct disorder, the queen mother of all behavior disorders, can also run in a pack. So here's my question for you tonight. Look around and see if you can find your chat button. If you don't see it, click on the three buttons near the three dots near the bottom of your screen. A chat should be one of your choices. And I'm going to say a statement, and then I'm going to ask you to put true or false in the chat. So here's the statement. I have learned something new tonight already. Please put a T for true or an F for false. And Bev and Karen, if you would just check those chat responses and kind of call them out to us.
Sure.
Looks like we have 4 responded so far.
And all true.
Nice. You'd hate to be hanging around for this long already and not getting anything, but I hope I have something more to offer as well. So what we really try to accomplish for kids with ADHD, you're not going to see on this list getting rid of the ADHD. Remember, it's biological, friends. This is not something that we can snap our fingers and get to go away. So we have to set expectations, reasonable expectations for what we can accomplish. And here's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase 3 things: how much work they produce, how long they stick with a task or with us during instruction, and how much they can increase their impulse control. We are not going to get 100% of the work done at exactly the time we wanted it done. We are not going to get no time off task. We are not going to get absolute impulse control. These kids remain children or adolescents. And look at the list. How often do you fail to produce some work or stick with something even though you've told yourself you should, or control your impulses? So I just want to remind us, here's what we're really trying to accomplish with these rascals, and we have to do it in the realm of reality. There are some pharmaceutical treatments. I'll just discuss them briefly. I'm not that kind of doctor, and I'm certainly not recommending them. But as I mentioned before, there are times when they can be very powerful for kids, especially those who have a comorbid set of conditions that make it almost impossible for them to get traction on fixing or responding to or getting better control over any one of them. So one set of pharmaceuticals probably the most common ones are called central nervous system stimulants. And you're thinking, what the heck? This kid is already hanging from the chandelier. What would we think giving him a stimulant? Well, remember the lazy governor idea. That area of the brain that's inefficient, that isn't working very well, when that area of the brain is stimulated, we get better impulse control, better focus, better concentration. So that's the theory and the chemistry behind that category. Some doctors also prescribe instead anticonvulsants. And these medications mostly work by slowing down the impulses, the neurological impulses that carry information in the central nervous system, slowing down those movements just enough where the student can concentrate or where the student doesn't fall off the concentration path. So anticonvulsants sometimes are effective. Some antidepressants are also effective. And if a child happens to have a combination of depression and learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder, something in this category might be recommended. The last category are antihypertensives. And you're thinking, wait a minute, I thought those are used to treat blood pressure. They are, but some have the additional benefit, or what we call the off use, not the intended use, of helping the mind calm. And so antihypertensives may be used. If your child is taking one of these medications or your student is taking one of these medications, it's good just to know the name of it. Do a little bit of research on it. Make sure you know what that medication looks like. So if the child brings some to school, you can say just on a visual, oh, yeah, that can be exactly what they really have. For most of us, pharmaceuticals are not an option. Teachers cannot prescribe drugs. We cannot insist that parents try drugs for their kids. There's plenty of reasons to think that medications might not be the best solution. So all of us need alternative treatments as well. And I'd just like to start there. One is caffeinated water. Caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant. How many adults on this call couldn't start a day without coffee? But many parents object to the idea of children drinking coffee. Some parents are willing to let their adolescents drink coffee, but if you want to avoid the coffee but still get the central nervous system stimulant that's not a pharmaceutical, that's readily available and lots of humans consume it, there's caffeinated water. One of the brands famously is called H2O Joe. Not pretty clever, you got to give them credit for that. Another thing that works for some kids are crunchy snacks. It seems that when we put pressure on any joint or muscle, we get a mild stimulation to that inefficient area of the brain that's responsible for focusing. So if we could let kids chew on crunchy snacks where they're getting that pressure right where the jaw works, this can actually help them pay attention. Now, if the child is already heavy, that might not be a good solution. And that's why you see I've offered so many choices, because one choice might not work for that particular student. One might not be in our wheelhouse to even recommend. Here's another choice, gum. I know, there's probably not a custodian in all of America that likes students to chew gum in school. The thing is that if that minor addition could help our student pay attention and learn, it seems like maybe we should consider that. We can have rules like, if I find that gum anywhere but in your mouth or the garbage can, you lose the privilege for a day or a week. The idea here is that if the kid really needs it, it usually has no other side effects that parents are worried about. I think it's something we should consider. Other options include using essential oils. Some folks think this whole idea of scents, SCENTS, to have an effect on humans is silly. If you do, that's fine. You don't have to use these. But here's the ones that usually are associated with helping a child calm down and therefore focus a little better. Those are bergamot, lavender, vanilla, and sandalwood. Remember, not every scent works for every person in the same way. An what we usually think of as an alerting scent, like cinnamon, might actually be calming for some individual. But these are good ones to at least start with. Please make sure that the child does not have an allergy to whatever you think you're going to try, and that you've cleared this with the family as well. So here's another statement for you. I'm glad there are so many alternatives of treatment for ADHD. Again, your choices are true and false, and you just need to put the one letter. We'll make it easy peasy. We've got one respondent so far. They're going to be pouring in. People are looking around. Wait, where's that chat thing? If you don't see the chat button, you click on the 3 dots and you'll find it.
We got trues.
Well, good for you. I'm also practicing a strategy that sometimes works for our students, where there's a kind of a point where they have to respond, and the response doesn't require them to write a sentence, which often would create a "I'm not going to do that" lady. So let's keep moving. What about students with ADHD? I have to drag my toolbar around. What is it that's distracting them? And I did talk about this distractibility feature before. Well, it turns out that most kids with ADHD are distracted by really only 4 categories of things. One of those categories is visual. They may be watching the kid with braids who sits in front of them and turns her head a lot, and the braids are hopping around. They may be paying attention to the flickering of the fluorescent lighting in the classroom. Now, this is another kind of interesting feature about kids with ADHD. Some of them actually have an especially acute sense of vision, and that's why they can see that fluorescent lighting is not continuous, that it's actually flashing much faster than strobe lighting. Most brains perceive it as continuous lighting, but some kids with ADHD can actually see the flickering. No wonder they look like they want to jump out of their skins by 9 a.m. Other kids are distracted by things that are auditory. And again, some of these kids have very acute sense of hearing. They literally hear the second hand on the classroom clock clicking from 1 second to the next. Again, no wonder they look like they want to jump out of their skins at school. Some are distracted by psychological features, and these can be things like fears, but they can also be things like anticipation. Oh my gosh, my cousin Mario's going to come over after school today, and he always brings his Nintendo, and I just can't wait, and it's so wonderful. That's a psychological distractor. And the fourth area is called the somatic or sensory area. And interestingly, some of these kids create the somatic distractions themselves. They take their own pen and they kind of rub their lip above the teeth and move the skin back and forth. They put their fingers on their head and move their scalp tissue around. They tap with their pens. They are actually creating the somatic distraction. So if we could find that any child we serve really only has distractors in one of these areas, we maybe could do something about it. Let's say that the child is primarily distractible visually. I recommend a ball cap or a visor. I know, all schools have rules against wearing hats in school. We could write it into the IEP if we had to. What happens is if I'm wearing a ball cap with a visor, or just wearing the visor, when I turn to look at my work, the visor is actually blocking me from seeing some of the other stuff that's happening in the classroom. By the same token, we could block auditory stimuli to some extent by having kids wear a headset attached to nothing. They're not listening to music instead of you. They're blocking out some of the ambient sound. Other kids passing gas, kids turning their pages, kids scuffing their feet along the floor. When we can reduce some of those auditory stimuli for kids that are very distractible auditorily, we actually might help them increase their work production, focus, have impulse control. So what helps kids, even folks with ADHD, pay attention? Again, there's 4 categories. One is one-to-one. You may notice that this child is actually better performed in your classroom when you are near him. That's what teachers tell me. Oh, he'll work. if I'm right there. And then I say, well, that's great. And they say, no. I said, well, what do you mean no? Well, I have to walk away. My question is, do you? Do you really have to walk away? If this kid works when you're there, some of your other kids don't need you, and quite a few of your kids don't want you. They think your coffee breath smells terrible. So there's no rule in teacher preparation that we should go to each child the same number of minutes. The same thing is true if you're the parent. You're at home, you've got a kid who needs one-to-one. I would park my butt closer to that kid during the entire homework duration if I could afford the time. So one-to-one. Another thing that helps them pay attention is intimidation. Now, I'm not encouraging you to try to beat your students or your children, but this intimidation is sometimes accomplished simply by being close. The one-to-one is also intimidating. It's also intimidating if you look serious. It's also intimidating if you have caused something to hinge on paying attention and getting the work done, like some kind of reinforcement. Many of us can pay better attention when something is novel, that is new. It's something we didn't know before, something we haven't experienced before, and that works well for kids with ADHD as well. And finally, all of us can pay attention better when what we are paying attention to is interesting to us. But I would like to make the sad statement that much of what we teach in school is not that dang interesting. So we have to add something else to it that is interesting to this child, and then we may be able to get a little better attention. So how do we get attention and maintain it? Well, I have several suggestions. Let's see them, what they are. Use of props. Now, props is actually an abbreviation. If you know what the full name for this word is, or what the full word is, would you please write it in the chat? What is the full word for props? These are things that we see used in theater. Maybe you don't know. These are properties. What it really means is objects. Now, remember, our students find objects to use. They stick all of their markers together in a long sword. They take pencils and wrap them against the desk like it's a drum kit. So the idea with these props is that they're ones that are tied to the content. So we might be able to help kids pay attention to the content by using objects. Another thing that might be helpful is graphic organizers. And many teachers know of some, the Venn diagram, the T-chart. How many are there that have names? I found 450, and I don't think I've found them all. I don't care if you know what the name is. Let's look at a graphic organizer, and you tell me what features I can manipulate to make a graphic organizer. I don't need anybody's name for it. I can make my own if I can tell what features are available to me. So please hold down your space bar or unmute yourself in the gallery and name something that you see in this graphic organizer, an element, a component that we could use in other graphic organizers. Don't hesitate, hop right on in there.
Circles.
Yes, shapes is something that's available to us. Perfect. So one of the things we can use in graphic organizers is shapes. What else?
Color.
Color, perfect. Anything else?
Pictures.
Yes, perfect.
I would say different size fonts.
Yes, text is something that's available to us, and we can manipulate it with size, color, type. Beautiful. Now, I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but another feature that we have available to us is called position in space. So take a look at this graphic organizer. How do you know where to begin? Where should you start looking at this thing?
In the center.
Yes, but
'Cause it's
that's not
big.
true of all of them. So let's say that I was trying to make a graphic organizer for A Christmas Carol. You know that Ebenezer Scrooge story. If I was introducing the Ghost of Christmas Past, the Ghost of Christmas Present, and the Ghost of Christmas Future, and I was going from top to bottom, where would the Ghost of Christmas Future be? at the bottom. And what if I was going left to right? Where would the Ghost of Christmas Past be?
In the right.
Careful, on the left, because
He's
in
going
left, right, we do like chronological order, right? So the Ghost of Christmas Past will come first, and then the Ghost of Christmas Present in the middle, and the Ghost of Christmas Future would be on the right. That's called position in space. And there are conventions of how to use that. And I brought up two. One is chronological, that goes from left to right. Another is chronological, that goes from top to bottom. So we've identified color, shape, text, pictures, position in space, and one more might be symbols. See how this particular one has like arrows, kind of showing that this one leads to that one, or this is kind of a circular thing. Those features are always available to us. That means we can make one anytime we want. We don't have to know what they're called or look them up. Plus, it means we can teach our kids to make them for themselves. Here's what else might help getting attention: adult signals. When you point to your nose, when you move closer to the child, when you tug on your earlobe, you can create signals that might even only be for your child with ADHD, although it seems that many effective teachers have some signals that they use for the whole class that are efficient. Another thing we can do is to color, block, or frame. So take a look at this. I used color in a color field. This one is like a tachistoscope. I cut out a space in the middle of a 5x8 card that is only big enough to show one line of type at a time. So the child is moving it down, seeing only one line of type at a time. The outer dark blocks the line before and under, and the hole in the middle calls attention to that part that can be seen. Cueing is also helpful, and here's an example. You've been looking at that sentence thinking, why does she have the lazy dog slept on the dock? Because I was going to show you this idea of cueing, which word I wanted you to pay attention to. So these strategies are always available to teachers. Another thing we can do is use what I call high response opportunities. That means a lot of kids can respond at one time, and you can use them dozens of times in the same period. One way to do that is simply to have small groups. So if you put your kids in stations and you're only teaching 3 in this group and then 5 in that group, each child gets a chance to talk more than one child in among 30 students. And remember, many of these kids can talk. They just don't like to write. How about show of fingers? You say, how many words are there in United States? And every student in the room can hold up 2 fingers to show the answer. How about card or paddle responses? I'll give you a picture. These are kind of like ping pong paddles, and one says yes and one says no. Every kid has a cardboard version of it. You make a statement and the kids can flash yes or no, pretending that they're Olympic diving judges. Another thing we could do is a whiteboard response. I teach college, and my undergraduate and graduate students love these whiteboards. You never, if it works, use it. How about thumbs in various directions? This image shows true and false, but some teachers use agree, disagree, not sure in the middle. High response opportunities. Classroom management. Well, it often turns out that when we ask kids to tell us what we told them to do and we hear it, we're like, I don't know how anybody got started. Those directions are really terrible. So the first thing we want to do is try to make good directions, brief and clear. For kids with autism as well, we often say less is more. We're trying to make our commands short enough that even a child who has difficulty paying attention can hear the whole thing and respond. Modeling is also very appropriate. You've got a kid who's hanging off of the chair. His one hand is on the floor, one hand is on the other kid's desk. You can move your body into an upright position and show placing your hands close to yourself. The kid might actually imitate you just because of mirror neurons. You don't have to call them by name. You just have to model. Also, identifying positive and negative consequences can be helpful. Being close to the child in question can be helpful. Getting the students to repeat the instructions. Remember, I told you one of the things you might do is hear what you said and hear how bad the directions are. Sometimes, though, we hear what they thought we said, and that also explains why they're not doing anything, because it really is garbled. We can use signals for change times, like I'll show students a pinch with my pointer and my thumb, and that means silence. And then when I open that pinch again, it means that they can go back to speaking. That's a signal for when there's a change in what the expectations are. We should review rules periodically. Of course, they're posted in the classroom, but you and I know something that's there all the time, we stop paying attention to it. So it's a good idea that you have another minute before the bell's going to ring. Instead of telling them, oh, you can have free time, you can say, everyone, your attention, take a look at number 2. It starts with a red 2. We're going to read it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And then you repeat that rule together. It's also important to use discriminate praise, or sometimes we call it specific praise. Not just good job or thank you or well done, but I love how you kept the pattern going. Something that is very specific to exactly what the child did right in the circumstance is called discriminate praise or specific praise. It has a much more powerful effect on the learner than just general praise. Structure is also very helpful for these kids. Imagine that they have the lazy governor in their brain that is keeping the state in a state of chaos. They need you to help them structure from without because they don't have much structure within. And then a new one for you. This time, I'm going to ask you to choose A, B, C, or D. And you're going to put your response in the chat. Here we go. I have A, used all of the strategies we've heard about tonight. Or B, I have used some of the strategies we've heard about tonight. Or C, I have used none yet, but I'm storing the ideas for the future. Or D, I've been waiting for a copy of this PowerPoint to decide which strategies to use. And you should know that the ICEC is willing to send you this document. Oh, it looks like several people have responded. Anybody pick A? How about B? And C? And D? Interesting. Let's see. This time we got a little bit more of a split. Well, thank you for playing. All right, let's proceed. In terms of organization and study skills, what about having a peer initial their assignment, writing down of the assignments? Many teachers tell me they think this is a good idea, but they don't have time to do it. They tell the child, write down your assignments. I'm going to come and check. And the next thing they know, all the kids are on the bus and they forgot to check. So this idea is asking a girl who's enrolled in most classes in America, her name is Miss Priss. Miss Priss can mind her business and the business of 6 other people without breaking a sweat. This child might be able to go and check on the other child's writing down of the assignments, making sure they're accurate and everything's there, and he's got what he needs to take home to do them. And she can initial it even when you cannot. Now, here's the thing, friends. Some Miss Prisses are not nice people. You are not allowed to select one of them. This is supposed to be a helpful strategy for the student who needs it, not an opportunity for embarrassment or ostracization. So you have to carefully choose who this peer who can initial might be. Think about a folder that has identified sections. When I was in college, high school, it took me a lot of time to find a place that had these. But there were these folders that had 2 pockets on each side of an element, and there were 6 of them. So I had 12 separate pockets. I could put all my 9 classes, had their own space, and then I also had some spaces for other assorted things. How about daily communication between school and home? We used to do this with a spiral notebook going back and forth, and maybe you still do. But we also have digital ways to do this with Seesaw or with Class Dojo. What about one notebook instead of one for each class? The advantage is if the child brings that thing, he's ready for every class. Now, you and I both know what's going to happen, don't you? One time, he's going to lose it altogether. And now what do? We run to Miss Priss. Her notes are perfect. All we have to do is make a quick photocopy, and our guy is back in business. What else about organization and study skills? I put in writing here the one I recommended before, wearing headphones, this time attached to nothing. You're not trying to distract the child. You're trying to help the child feel a little less distraction from the ambient sounds in the environment. Privacy areas are helpful. I'm not a big fan of the wooden carrels of the size and type that you find in libraries. I'm not sure what kids are actually doing behind there. It might not be the work at all. I think we can borrow a tip from 5th grade girls. I don't know, do these chicks work for the CIA or the FBI? They're always protecting their work. They've got a stack of books so that other kids can't see their work. They put up 2 pocket folders like screens. So maybe we could borrow some of those privacy areas. The idea here is that the child with ADHD is less distracted when she can work behind some kind of screen that blocks out some of the other activity in the classroom. Another suggestion that I make is large space. These kids are not usually good at maintaining everything in one desk. Things are falling on the floor, so you can give them a dairy crate next to the desk, and now they have the crate plus the desk, or maybe 2 desks. And another thing that works for some kids is to put a tape perimeter on the floor around the space. They can get up and walk as far as the edge of that tape. They can sit anywhere they want within the taped space, but they have to stay in that taped area during some required periods of time. Now, the other advantage of having large space, I'll talk to you about that in a minute, is that you can also, if the child has 2 desks, 2 seats, suddenly in the middle of instruction, you just mutter, switch, and this kid knows to get up and move to the other seat. They're listening to you teach because they're waiting for the next switch command. Now, multisensory instruction, that means seeing it and saying it, or seeing it and writing it, or seeing it and hearing it, is always good for all kids with disabilities, and I've tried to employ that strategy tonight. Some of the other things that work within this multisensory idea is using melody and rhythm. You might remember very early we had that slide. Some people think ADHD is this, but what ADHD really is this. And one of the things we saw was poor working memory. And melody and rhythm are ways to enhance memory. You should give instructions both visually and verbally. The child who lost it and wasn't hearing part of the instructions, when you were saying them, could look on the paper or on the board and see what they were later. It's also important for these kids to use color and things that they find visually interesting. Again, another mark on that valuable use of graphic organizers. It's important to provide variety and also comfort in seating and working in the classroom. Remember that I told you that stimulation to any muscle or joint mildly stimulates the region of the brain responsible for concentration. So we see these kids accidentally trying to create pressure on their joints. He's got his knees on the seat, his elbows on the desk. He's created like a suspension bridge out of his body. Look what's happening. Pressure on the knee joints, pressure on the ankle joints where they're pressed against the back of the seat, pressure on the elbow joints, pressure on the wrists. These kids are trying to pay attention. Some of the restless behavior they do is just this constant search for being able to pay attention for another moment. If we do expect things in writing, they can't just talk the whole answer or talk the whole task. We should have to consider that they maybe will not be able to write as much or as long as other students. We may also have to shorten assignments. And if they've proven already that they know the skill that we're trying to teach, it's not even like any skin off our nose. The only reason we give assignments is to make sure the kids are learning. It might be helpful to prioritize assignments and help the child know which parts of it to do first. And again, those graphic organizers encapsulate multisensory stimulation. The other thing that you probably can think about just thinking about multisensory is how can kids be physically engaged? We now know that one of the reasons for that is because of this pressure on any joint or muscle. So one of the things we could do is have our students stub. I wasn't sure what word to use, stab, maybe. The idea is that as they're reading, which is a very sedentary activity, they actually are using a pencil with the eraser end down toward the book, and they're kind of pushing slightly against every single word. That's putting pressure on their joints and their muscles in the hand, and that's stimulating that region of the brain that's responsible for focus, called the proprioceptive region. Another thing that might serve that purpose is adding manipulatives to any subject possible. I called them props in another slide. We may think of them instructionally as manipulatives. How about moving an index card along under the text while reading? Some students have a lot of trouble, especially if they have dyslexia or another learning disability. They have trouble kind of tracking how far to drop their eyes down and where to start at the left again on the next line. If the eyes won't do it, what if the hand will? What if the hand can memorize the drop from one line to the next and simply move the card down? How about an index card with just one line's worth of type? I showed that picture in the blocking and framing that's cut from the center to block and frame what deserves attention. How about highlighting the text while reading? And I don't mind if it's all of it. Teachers will tell me, well, I can't tell my kids to highlight. They highlight everything. They don't know what's important. And my thinking is, all I'm trying to do with this little rascal is to get him to keep reading. And if moving a highlighter across the text makes that happen, I'm fine. I'm not trying to get him to pay attention to what's the most important. I'm just trying to get him to stick with reading. Now, you and I also know that we might not be able to provide this strategy because the state is not going to reimburse your district for textbooks again until 2047. So if we can't let them write in books or highlight in the book, what are our choices? Well, there's highlighter tape that uses an adhesive rather like Post-its, so it doesn't leave a residue after you peel it up off the lines of type. You could make a photocopy and the child can highlight the photocopy, or you could even put a sheet of acetate, like an overhead projector sheet, on the text, and the kid puts the highlighting on the plastic rather than on the book itself. How about assigning 2 seats? Oh, here's the one I mentioned before, and you just give that switch call. And if you see the kid starting to get restless, how about that's a good time to say switch? And then finally, what we might call brain breaks, and all good teachers use these. What we let kids do might have to vary a little bit, but the idea of simply breaking from constant expectation for concentration is usually a helpful thing for many young people. And these, this teacher in class, I don't know, they might be doing go noodle, or maybe they're just, the teacher is saying stretch your arms or whatever. What about diffusing hyperactivity? Well, remember I said between 1/3 and 1/2 of boys with ADHD may have the hyperactivity component, fewer girls. But for those kids who have it, what can we do about it? Well, one of the things that this may be related to is anxiety, as I mentioned before. So I'm using this cue to chill out, to think about ways for reducing hyperactivity. Deep breathing sometimes helps our kids be a little less physically restless. An opportunity for physical activity, and we looked at some of those, like stubbing each word with the pencil eraser. A place to relax, that might be a good solution for the brain break. If the brain break is too stimulating, the child might actually be more hyper when he comes back and you're expecting him to be ready to learn. Handheld devices, there's nothing special about these friends. It's just a gimmick. Most kids like technology. So if we can make something that uses a calculator or uses a coinulator or uses some other handheld device, it often can sustain attention a little bit longer. Journaling is good for some kids where they write what they feel. Remember, though, that not all of these kids like to write at all, and I certainly would not require complete sentences. How about guided imagery? This is kind of a close your eyes and picture this phenomenon. Some teachers have really good somnolent voices that help kids calm down and that they can lead this guided imagery. A protein snack is usually helpful for kids. Sugar, candy, or some other kind of carb snack is metabolized too quickly and does not provide a kind of an even energy going forward, but protein is useful in that way. If it could be crunchy as well, that could be good. And any music that is at 60 beats per minute or fewer. If you're expecting the child to learn while listening to the music, you might not be able to get away with music that has lyrics. You might have to use just instrumental. And what I'd like to end with then tonight is an opportunity for this young man to tell us about ADHD from his own perspective. So let's see what he's got to say. I might have to adjust the volume. Okay, I'm assuming, of course, that you did not notice the kid that has the condition, but let's see if you can find it.
Ik ga me steeds houden, vandaag om 11:30. Voor jullie is vertellen, het gaat over mezelf. Het is iets wat ik heb.
Yes, it's not in English. Can you see the closed captioning? All right, let's go on.
Jullie wat? Ik leerde van dat de stof is. Ik ben de stof in de piemels. En daar ben ik veel te. Ik gooi van alles, maar ik ben een van ik snap zelf niet eens waarom. Dat is best veel, maar ik ben niet zo. Ik ben met ADHD. Ik problemen, ik zit geen seconde stil. En daarom moet ik van de dokter elke dag een pil. Ik zit nu niet meer te wiebelen, gooi niet meer met mijn pen. Maar soms denk ik, of ik iemand anders ben. Maar als ik geweest, ik ben dat hebben andere vrienden vast en zeker wel geleerd. Dan moet ik even aan ze even alle remmen los. De moeder zegt dan ga maar lekker door. Ik ben een gewone jongen. Ik ben niet gek, ik ben alleen te druk. Ik snap zelf niet eens waarom. Dat is best vervelend, maar ik ben niet ziek. Ik ben een gewone jongen. Met ADHD. Als ik een keer mijn troep vergeet, dan gaat het weer verkeerd. Dan zegt de meester, jongen, jij bent niet geconcentreerd. Ik denk aan 1000 dingen, mijn gedachten slaan op. Ik kan niet rustig blijven, want mijn hoofd is veel te vol. Ik draai en ik maak een gek geluid. Ik wil naar de wc. De meester zegt, blijf zitten, let nu een keertje op. Ik pak mijn boek, ik dans en door. Ik moet me concentreren, maar ik weet niet wat het is. Als ik het nu wel krijg, dan gaat het zeker mis. Ik foute antwoord uit de verkeerde les. Ik heb het even best, maar ik weet niet wat het is. Ik ben gewoon niet bang. Ik ben niet gek, ik ben niet, ik ben alleen. Ik snap zelf niet eens waarom. Dat is best vervelend, maar ik wens je met ADHD. Dat kan bespreken. Zijn vragen? Oké.
Well, it's not German. I know a little German. I think it might be Dutch. But you see, as he explained his own condition, he said, I don't have control over this, some of the things that I do. And my doctor prescribed a pill, and the teacher thinks that I'm crazy. But one of the things that he explains is that, and this is true for some kids, those kids who are medicated, it's almost as if all the energy that they did not expend when the medication was active, they have been storing it. And they almost need to have like a release of that energy after the medication wears off. For parents who hear what the benefits of the medication should be and don't see those benefits because it's happening at school, they may pull a kid off of medication thinking, my gosh, he's worse, when it actually could be this kind of saved energy from what the medication helped them control during the day. So we are at 8 o'clock. I'm open for questions if you have any that you'd like to pitch.
I have a question I'd like to ask.
Okay, Monica,
First of all, thank you so much for your information.
you're welcome.
I have read recently about something called calming strips. Have you heard
No.
of those?
I haven't.
Okay,
Have
they
you seen a
are,
description?
yeah, I will see if I can find them. They're supposed to be reusable tactile sensory strips,
Huh.
if you will. It looks like someone
Oh,
said they
and
have one on-
Alicia's showing one. There it is.
Okay.
Thank you. So it has a raised surface and I can rub my fingers over it.
That's
Do you
what it
know
looks
what
like.
we used to do in the old days? We would take Velcro and put a strip of each, the rough and the fuzzy, on up under the desk, and the kids could kind of use that. Now, of course, we got this fancy schmancy thing. Yeah, and another example is denim. Good, thanks for bringing that up.
I will, there's just I'll put a Amazon link in the chat.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
just, I don't know if this is the best link, but it's, there's all kinds of different ones. Alicia, does it work for you? I'm very curious about your response to it.
I do not have an ADHD diagnosis myself. However, I have used them with students with different diagnoses, even just students without a diagnosis. And it can be, just it. I will be honest, like for me personally, it helps me during meetings, just like sometimes like I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just kind of, but also my own two children, I've used them with who do not have diagnoses currently, as well as, like I said, some of the little guys that I worked with, some of the little kiddos. It really does kind of just, and I love them because, a lot of kids over the years I've taught in both general education and special education spaces, they like to peel things. So the Velcro only lasts so long before you have to replace it. The calming strips are really, I found them in spaces that are really affordable, and you can get a ton of them. So they can put them on their desk, they can put them on their books, they can put them on their pencil cases, like it can go anywhere.
And it sounds like you're saying they're very durable, that they kind of hold up.
Yes, and again, even if they peel off, like this one, I can't really peel it off. Like I'd have to like really pull. But they're so like if they pull them off, you just stick another one on there. Like the Velcro would leave that like real sticky substance on it that was really, custodians did not like. These don't really do that. And I've even put them, like I have one on my laptop, but I don't know if you can see this or not, but this one actually also has like the little maze go through.
So you can either just feel the sensation or you can actually challenge yourself to the maze.
Right. And I don't think I can show these, but on my laptop, I have one that's, I don't know if you've heard of star breathing, but it's it's shaped like a star and you go up and you breathe in and you go down the star and you breathe out. So there's like it's a cue for breathing too. So it can serve
Nice.
multiple purposes. So I really like them, Monica. I think they're worth the money that I've spent on them.
Okay, thank you.
Well done. Well, my friends, I want to thank you for your patience and your participation. I appreciate your kind attention. Bless you as you work with our kids.
Thank you, everybody. So we will be, let me see, the schedule for next month is, see if I can get it would be April 15th, I believe. And
See if I see it in the newsletter, maybe.
yeah, let me find the next session. I had it right up on my website or my computer just a minute ago. So first, this recording will be up on the website on the main Illinois Illinois CEC page. You'll be able to find the recording for tonight and then the recordings for the entire series. And then the next one is going to be Monday, April 15th at 7, and it is a panel, and it is on transition planning. So that is our next topic.
Good variety.
Yeah. So we hope to see everybody next month, and thank you everybody for being here tonight.
Good night.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Good night, everybody. Okay.